Many, many. I had many incidents.
Man, Gene Anthony Ray was pure fire on that dance floor. Every move he made felt like electricity, Harlem rhythm running through his veins. You couldn't take your eyes off him in Fame, that 1980 film that turned him into a worldwide sensation. He was raw, real, and impossible to copy. But behind that wild talent was a story that Fame never really told. The industry praised his character, Leroy Johnson, yet forgot the man who created him. A kid from Harlem who danced his way into history, only to find himself fighting the shadows of rejection, addiction, and silence. By the time the spotlight faded, the world had already moved on. How could someone that talented end up so alone? Let's get into his story right now. Let me know where you're watching this from in the comments. Grab yourself a warm drink, maybe a cup of water or tea, sit back, and let's start this journey together. Gene Anthony Ray was born on the 24th of May 1962 in Harlem, New York, a place that could either make you or break you. Harlem in those days was more than a neighborhood. It was rhythm, motion, and soul packed into every corner. Music blasted from open windows, preachers shouted on street corners, and kids turned cracked sidewalks into dance floors. You didn't just grow up in Harlem, you survived it. You learned from it. And if you had something special, you showed it off. Gene's mother, Jean Ray, had been a dancer herself, part of a generation of black women who never got the stages they deserved. She recognized something in her boy early on, a natural rhythm, a body that seemed born to move. Gene would watch her dance in the living room, mimic her steps, then spin off into his own version, wild, joyful, unstoppable. His father wasn't around much, so his mom and grandmother held down the family. His grandmother, by all accounts, was a tough Harlem woman who ran things her way. People in the neighborhood respected her and feared her a little too. Growing up, Gene didn't have fancy studios or formal lessons. His dance school was the block, the corner, the park. He learned rhythm from the radio James Brown, Earth, Wind and Fire, Donna Summer and style from the people moving around him. That mix of raw Harlem street energy and soul music gave him something no class could teach: authenticity. By the late 1970s, Harlem was changing. The disco wave hit, but poverty and drugs crept in too. You could see the highs and lows of the city all in one block, a block where Gene danced, laughed, and dreamed. Everyone around him knew he was different. He had that sparkle, that it factor people talk about. And man, he could move. Neighbors used to stop and watch him dance under the streetlights. Some thought he was showing off. Others saw a kid trying to turn pain into power. Harlem gave him the grit, but dance gave him freedom. When he moved, you could tell he wasn't just performing, he was escaping. Even as a teenager, Gene stood out for his energy and charisma. He didn't talk about wanting fame or money. He wanted to feel alive. Harlem molded him the rhythm, the struggle, the pride, and every spin, every kick carried that story. That boy from Harlem wasn't chasing attention. He was chasing a feeling, and soon, the whole world would feel it too. When Gene Anthony Ray got into New York's High School of Performing Arts, it was a big deal, especially for a kid from Harlem. That school, sitting right in the heart of Manhattan, was where dreams were supposed to come true. The best dancers, singers, and actors in the city wanted to walk through those doors. For Gene, it wasn't just an opportunity. It was validation that all those nights dancing under streetlights had meant something. But Gene wasn't built to fit in, he was built to stand out. His style wasn't textbook. It was raw, street, and full of attitude. Teachers didn't know what to do with him. Some said he had talent but no discipline. Others whispered that he was too much, too wild, too loud, too confident. He wasn't the quiet type who followed rules. He was the kind who made them. Man, Gene was the kind of student who would walk into class, crank up the energy, and make everyone else look like they were moving in slow motion. But with that same fire came trouble. He clashed with teachers, skipped lessons, and sometimes didn't show up at all. Eventually, the school couldn't handle his rebellious streak. They expelled him. Just like that, the boy who had danced his way into the most prestigious performing arts school in the city was told he didn't belong there anymore. But here's the thing, Gene didn't let that break him. He laughed it off, told friends, "They can't teach me how to feel the beat, man." And he was right. His power didn't come from choreography books or fancy ballet routines. It came from rhythm pure and unfiltered. After leaving school, he kept dancing everywhere he could, block parties, clubs, community centers. Harlem was his real classroom. The crowd was his audience. Every move he made, every pop and twist, spoke louder than any grade on a report card. People started calling him the kid who dances like fire. In those years, the streets of New York were buzzing with new sounds. Funk, disco, early hip-hop. Gene soaked it all in. He'd dance in the park with boomboxes blasting or show up at downtown clubs where the city's underground dance culture was exploding. Everyone remembered him, that fearless energy, that grin that said he was having the time of his life. What's wild is that this rejection, this so-called failure, was exactly what shaped his legend. Because when Hollywood came calling a few years later, they weren't looking for a polished studio dancer, they wanted someone real, someone who was the rhythm. And when Gene walked into that audition room for a new movie called Fame, he wasn't just another hopeful performer. He was Harlem in human form, defiant, alive, and ready to show the world what it had been missing. That fire the school tried to extinguish? Yeah, it was about to light up the whole world. It's 1,979 inches New York City disco still alive, funk is fading, and the streets are hungry for something new. Gene Anthony Ray hears about an open audition for a movie called Fame. He's not even planning to go at first. A friend drags him there, saying, "Man, they're looking for dancers, this is your shot." Gene shows up late, wearing street clothes. No headshot, no resume, just confidence and rhythm. The second he starts moving, the whole room changes. Director Alan Parker and choreographer Debbie Allen can't believe what they're seeing. This kid from Harlem, with no formal training, dances like his body's got electricity running through it. He's fearless, unpredictable, full of energy, exactly what Fame needed. They cast him on the spot as Leroy Johnson, a character written after Gene himself. It wasn't acting, it was just him being him. When the movie dropped in 1980, it hit like a bomb. Fame wasn't just another dance film, it was a cultural statement. It captured the hunger, the hope, and the chaos of chasing dreams in New York. And at the center of it all was Gene, shirtless, sweating, spinning with that Harlem fire in his eyes. Every move screamed freedom. He wasn't polished, but he was magnetic. Critics called his dancing raw and revolutionary. Fans called him unforgettable. For the first time, audiences around the world saw a young black man owning the screen not as a stereotype, but as pure talent. Leroy Johnson became a household name, and Gene's face was suddenly everywhere, posters, TV spots, interviews. He went from street corners to stardom almost overnight. But fame, man, fame is tricky. Everyone wanted a piece of him. Reporters asked about his background, his love life, his attitude. Some called him the next big thing, others said he was too wild for Hollywood. But Gene didn't care. He was living his dream, dancing for the people who understood him, the ones who grew up like he did, fighting to be seen. He traveled the world for premieres, meeting fans from London to Tokyo who saw in him something real: energy, courage, authenticity. And through it all, he stayed that same Harlem kid with the sharp grin and unstoppable rhythm. Gene Anthony Ray had officially made it from the block to the big screen, and the world couldn't get enough of him, not yet. After the movie Fame blew up in 1980, the world couldn't get enough of it, and especially not enough of Gene Anthony Ray. The film's success sparked a full-blown TV series that launched in 1982, and Gene was right there again as Leroy Johnson. This time, the audience didn't just get a glimpse of him, they got him in their living rooms every week. From the very first episode, Gene owned the screen. That attitude, that humor, that "I don't care what you think" energy, man, it was all him. Kids around the world looked up to Leroy. He was bold, confident, and unapologetically himself. For a lot of black and brown viewers, seeing a dancer like Gene on mainstream television was groundbreaking. Representation wasn't just a buzzword back then, it was rare, and Gene gave it a face. The chemistry between him and Debbie Allen, who played the no-nonsense dance instructor Lydia Grant, was pure gold. Their scenes together crackled with energy teacher versus rebel, discipline versus instinct. And even though the show had many talented cast members like Nia Peoples, Carlo Imperato, and Erica Gimple, Gene stood out every single time he hit the floor. His moves had soul, his attitude had truth. You could tell he was dancing not for fame, but for freedom. The Fame TV series became an international hit. Fans from Britain, Italy, France, and Japan sent letters by the thousands. When the cast toured overseas, Gene was treated like a superstar. In Europe, especially in France and the UK, he found a level of love and acceptance he never quite got from Hollywood. He'd laugh, flirt with fans, and dance until security had to step in. People adored him because he was real, no mask, no filter. But with fame came chaos. The schedule was brutal, the pressure constant. Gene partied hard, lived fast, and didn't always show up to set on time. The same rebellious fire that made him special also made him difficult to manage. Producers loved his talent but struggled with his unpredictability. Still, the audience didn't care. Every time he appeared on screen, ratings went up. By the mid-1980, Gene Anthony Ray had become an icon, a symbol of energy, freedom, and black excellence in dance. From Harlem sidewalks to TV screens across the world, his dream had come true. But behind the lights and applause, the cracks were already starting to show. By the time fame hit its stride in the mid-1980, Gene Anthony Ray was more than just an actor or dancer. He was a cultural moment. You could walk down a street in New York, London, or Paris and see posters of Leroy Johnson taped to bedroom walls, dance studios naming classes after him, and kids trying to copy his moves in front of mirrors. The world had never seen anything quite like him. He wasn't a trained ballet dancer or a jazz technician. He was instinct, rhythm, and attitude wrapped in muscle and soul. Watching Gene dance felt like watching someone tell their life story without words. Every kick and turn came straight from Harlem's asphalt. It wasn't pretty, but it was honest, and that honesty hit people right in the gut. Debbie Allen once said that when Gene stepped on stage, everyone else had to raise their level just to keep up. Directors noticed it too. He could walk into a room full of professionals, and suddenly the air changed like the tempo shifted around him. For a while, that energy made him unstoppable. He appeared on award shows, talk shows, and countless live performances. Whenever fame needed to bring down the house, they sent Gene out to dance. In 1983 and 1984, the show's popularity peaked. The cast went on international tours, performing live concerts, and Gene was always the highlight. In the UK and France, fans treated him like Michael Jackson. They screamed his name, threw roses, cried when he smiled at them. He had that kind of charisma you couldn't fake. But what made him truly special wasn't just talent, it was the emotion behind it. Gene brought Harlem to Hollywood, unfiltered. In an era when black male dancers were rarely given center stage, he forced audiences to see him not as background, but as brilliance. He danced like he belonged, even in spaces that weren't built for him. That was revolutionary. At his peak, Gene was earning international recognition and had the kind of fame that could have led anywhere: choreography, acting, even directing. Yet, even then, he never seemed fully comfortable with the spotlight. He loved performing but hated the politics that came with it. The industry wanted him polished. Gene wanted to stay real. For a brief, electric moment, he stood at the top, Harlem's own star, lighting up the world. But as bright as his light burned, Hollywood was already deciding how to dim it. Fame made Gene Anthony Ray a star, but it also made him a target. Hollywood didn't know what to do with a dancer who didn't fit their box. He wasn't the clean-cut Broadway type, and he wasn't the quiet, compliant actor executives preferred. Gene was raw Harlem energy, loud, proud, and unpredictable. That's what fans loved, and exactly what scared the industry. Rumors started floating around the Fame set. Some producers said he was hard to handle. Others complained about his lateness or his refusal to follow directions. He wasn't disrespectful, he just didn't play the game. In an era when black performers were expected to smile and stay grateful, Gene had the nerve to ask questions, to demand better. Man, that rubbed people the wrong way. There were whispers that he was too street, that his look was too urban. The very same qualities that made Leroy Johnson authentic on screen suddenly became liabilities off camera. Hollywood loved the idea of the real Harlem dancer, but not the real Harlem man behind it. That's the sad irony. They wanted his rhythm, but not his truth. As the Fame series went on, tension built up. Gene's partying made headlines. His open confidence about his sexuality and flamboyant personality made the industry nervous. The early 1980 were not kind to artists who didn't conform, especially gay or bisexual black men. Instead of support, Gene faced judgment. Instead of opportunity, he got exclusion. Eventually, he was written out of the series. Some say it was because of contract issues, others because of behind-the-scenes drama. Whatever the reason, it was the start of his slow fade from the spotlight. Hollywood didn't give second chances to people like Gene. Once they decided you were difficult, doors closed fast. Still, even with the industry walls closing in, Gene never lost his spirit. He kept performing guest appearances, dance events, stage shows, anything that let him move. But the offers grew fewer each year. Watching him fade from screens was painful for those who loved him. Fans wondered, how could someone who brought so much life to fame end up forgotten so quickly? One fan wrote years later, he should have had his own dance company like Alvin Ailey. And honestly, they were right. Gene had that level of brilliance, but the world wasn't ready for him, not yet. They celebrated the character he played, but forgot the man who lived it. And that's the cruel side of fame. It remembers the performance, not always the performer. When the lights of fame dimmed, Gene Anthony Ray found himself standing in the dark, literally and figuratively. The same city that had once celebrated him now barely recognized him. After leaving the show, he tried to keep the momentum going, performing at clubs, choreographing for small productions, anything that kept him moving. But the calls got fewer. Hollywood had moved on to the next big thing, and Gene was suddenly yesterday's news. For someone who lived for the stage, that silence was painful. You could see it in the rare interviews he gave during the late 1980, that mix of pride and frustration. He'd smile, crack a joke, but behind his eyes there was something heavier. "They forget quick, man," he once said. "You dance your heart out, and then one day, they act like they never saw you." The industry's rejection hit him hard. Work was scarce, money tighter. He picked up side gigs, teaching dance, doing choreography for music videos, but the big offers never came. Still, Gene didn't stop giving. He taught young dancers in Harlem, sharing his techniques, telling them to feel the beat, not just count it. To those kids, he was still a legend. By the early 1990s, though, things got tougher. The party lifestyle that had once been fun started taking a toll. Drugs, alcohol, the same vices that haunted many stars of that era crept into his world. The 1,990 crack epidemic hit New York hard, and the streets that once gave him life were now full of danger and temptation. Friends said he tried to stay positive, but the hustle got real. He bounced between New York and Los Angeles looking for steady work, sometimes living with friends, sometimes crashing wherever he could. There were glimpses of light, moments where it seemed he might find his way back. He appeared in a few European TV specials and stage tours, especially in the UK and France, where fans never stopped loving him. Over there, Gene still had the magic. The audiences cheered like it was 1,980 all over again. But once the music stopped, reality returned. He didn't have the network or the backing to rebuild a Hollywood career. Sometime in the late 1990s, he settled in Paris for a while, performing small shows, teaching dance workshops. People who met him there described him as charming, funny, and full of warmth, even when life wasn't easy. One fan later recalled, "He had me sit with him when others ignored me. He was kind. Even when he had nothing, he still had love to give." That was Gene, a man who never stopped giving light, even when his own world was dim. But the truth is, the spotlight that once gave him life also left a shadow he could never escape. Fame can lift you up and drop you fast, especially when you're different, outspoken, and real. And for Gene Anthony Ray, the boy from Harlem who danced his way into millions of hearts that fall, was steep. Still, if you looked close, you could see it. That flicker of rhythm still in his step. That little spark that said, "I'm still here." But life was about to test that spirit in ways he never saw coming. By the late 1990s, Gene Anthony Ray was still trying to find peace in a world that had moved on without him. He was living between New York and Paris, teaching dance workshops, performing in small shows, and taking whatever gigs came his way. To his fans, he was still that electric force from fame, but privately, life had grown heavier. Rumors began to spread that Gene was sick. He'd lost weight, moved slower, and his energy wasn't what it used to be. In those days, people whispered more than they talked, especially when it came to HIV. The virus carried so much fear and stigma that even saying the word out loud could ruin a person's career. For a black man, for a gay or bisexual artist, it was even harder. Society wasn't kind, and the entertainment world, even less forgiving. When the truth came out that Gene had contracted HIV, it broke the hearts of those who loved him. But for Gene, it was just another fight. He didn't want pity. He wanted to live. People close to him said he still danced whenever he could, still smiled, still laughed that deep Harlem laugh that could fill a room. Yet behind the laughter, he was tired not just from the illness, but from years of being misunderstood, undervalued, and forgotten by an industry that once cheered his name. Losing his mother was another blow he never truly recovered from. She had been his biggest supporter, the one who always believed in him. When she passed away, something inside Gene dimmed. He spoke less, performed less. Friends said he often stared off quietly, as if trying to remember who he used to be. In 2002, the BBC tracked him down in Paris for a documentary about fame. When the cameras rolled, viewers were shocked. The once vibrant, unstoppable dancer now looked frail, his movements slower, his voice softer. But even then, you could see that same spark in his eyes, that soul that never gave up. "I'm okay," he told the interviewer with a tired smile. "Just tired." The following year, on the 14th of November, 2003, Gene Anthony Ray passed away from complications related to a stroke and HIV. He was only 41 years old. When the news broke, it barely made national headlines. There were no big tributes, no awards shows dedicating a segment to him. Just a few quiet mentions and a flood of love from fans who had never forgotten the boy who danced like freedom itself. In Harlem, people remembered him as the kid who brought light to the block. In Europe, fans held small memorials, playing Fame and dancing in his honor. Online, old clips resurfaced, and a new generation discovered him not the celebrity, but the man. His death was a reminder of how unforgiving the spotlight can be, how the same world that cheers you on can fall silent when you fall ill. But Gene's story didn't end there, because even as his body gave out, his legacy, that fearless, fire-filled movement, kept going. He didn't lose his light, man. The world just stopped looking. Even after his passing, Gene Anthony Ray's influence never really disappeared, it just shifted. You can still see pieces of him in every dancer who hits the floor with attitude, soul, and raw emotion. That Leroy Johnson spirit, fearless, passionate, untamed, became a blueprint for generations who came after. For a lot of young black performers in the 1990 and 2000 eras, Gene was the first time they saw themselves on screen, loud, proud, imperfect, and brilliant. Before Fame, dancers like him didn't get that kind of shine. But Gene changed that. He showed the world that you didn't need classical training to be great. You just needed fire, rhythm, and truth. And that message still hits hard today. Artists like Debbie Allen, Nia Peoples, and even newer choreographers have spoken about his impact, how his energy made everyone better, how he brought Harlem's heartbeat into every studio he entered. In interviews, Allen once said, "He was real. That's why people loved him." And she was right. You can't fake authenticity, and Gene had it in every move. When MTV and music videos exploded in the mid-1980 era, you could see Gene's fingerprints all over pop culture. The street jazz fusion style he embodied became the foundation for so many performers, from Michael Jackson's fluid energy to later icons like Usher and Chris Brown, who built entire careers on dance styles that carried echoes of Gene's movement. In the LGBTQ+ community, Gene's presence was equally powerful. At a time when being openly queer or flamboyant could end your career, he embodied confidence. He didn't announce it, he lived it. He made space for others to move freely, to exist without apology. His very being challenged stereotypes about what a black male dancer could be. Even on Broadway and in modern dance circles, Gene's essence lingers. Dancers who never met him still cite him as a reason they started performing. Social media tributes, viral clips of Fame, and fan-made documentaries keep his legacy alive. That Harlem rhythm, that fearless energy keeps pulsing through time. He may not have gotten the trophies or the headlines, but his influence? Man, it's everywhere. Every time someone dances with unfiltered emotion, every time a performer breaks a stereotype, that's Gene Anthony Ray moving through them. He wasn't just a dancer. He was a movement. And that movement never stopped. For years after his death, Gene Anthony Ray's name faded quietly into memory, but the people who truly loved him never let that flame die. In the mid-2000 era, Fans began sharing old clips of Fame online, and a new generation discovered the man behind the moves. Teenagers who weren't even alive when the show aired were suddenly commenting, "Who is this guy? He's incredible." That rediscovery felt like poetic justice. On YouTube, tribute videos popped up, fans editing together scenes of Gene dancing to modern beats, writing messages like, "Gone too soon," and "Still the best to ever do it." In the comment sections, people traded stories, meeting him on the streets of Harlem, seeing him perform live, remembering his warmth. The love was genuine, deep, and lasting. Even industry folks began to speak his name again. Debbie Allen mentioned him in interviews, calling him a force of nature. Documentaries like Bring Back Fame reminded audiences how vital he was to that era. And when fans saw that BBC footage from 2002 showing him frail but still smiling, they felt both heartbreak and admiration. It was a reminder of his resilience, how even in struggle, Gene kept that glow. In France, where he had spent his later years, some local dance schools held small tributes. In New York, community centers honored him during Black History Month. On social media, hashtags began to appear. Number Give Them Their Flowers and Number Underrated Legends. People demanding respect for artists like Gene who didn't get their due while alive. Out of that energy came a new wave of appreciation. What some fans now call Flowers Underrated, a movement to celebrate overlooked icons before it's too late. And that's where channels like Celebrity Underrated come in, not just telling stories, but restoring legacies. Through videos and discussions, new fans are learning who Gene was, beyond the fame and tragedy. They're realizing how ahead of his time he really was, as a dancer, as a performer, and as a human being unafraid to live his truth. The rediscovery of Gene Anthony Ray isn't just nostalgia. It's correction. It's the world finally catching up to a talent that was always there. The man who once lit up the screen with raw passion is now lighting up hearts again through memories, through art, through every dancer who moves with that same fearless energy. He may have left this world at 41, but man, his spirit still spins, still kicks, still shines. And this time, we're not letting it fade again. Picture this, man, Harlem, 1970. A little boy dancing on the corner, spinning in the streetlight glow, sneakers scraping the pavement, neighbors cheering him on. That was Gene Anthony Ray before the world knew his name. No fame, no cameras, no Hollywood, just rhythm, pure and untamed. And that rhythm never left him, not through the highs, not through the heartbreak, not even when the world stopped clapping. When people think of fame, they remember the energy, the sweat, the dream. But behind all that was Gene, the heartbeat that made it real. He didn't just play Leroy Johnson, he was Leroy, the kid from the streets who believed that talent could take you anywhere if you just danced hard enough. That belief carried him from Harlem sidewalks to international stages, from the local park to the silver screen. Yet, fame has a cruel rhythm. It moves fast, forgets faster. One minute you're the reason people smile, the next you're a story they half remember. For Gene, that was the hardest part. The world loved his gift, but didn't always love him, his truth, his fire, his difference. But man, he never stopped being real. He never traded his authenticity for acceptance. People who met him, whether it was on a set, at a dance class, or just on the street, all say the same thing. He was kind, down to earth, funny as hell. The kind of guy who'd make you feel like you mattered, even if you were a stranger. That's rare in this world, especially in an industry built on ego and illusion. Gene had none of that. He carried Harlem's honesty wherever he went. When you watch those old Fame clips now, it hits different. You see the joy, but you also feel the weight, the story behind those moves. Every turn, every kick, every drop of sweat was a statement. I belong here. He wasn't just dancing for himself, he was dancing for everyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong. That's why decades later, people still talk about him. Gene Anthony Ray may not have won trophies or lifetime achievement awards, but he gave the world something better: inspiration. He taught us that greatness doesn't need permission, that talent doesn't ask for validation. He showed that even when life pushes you down, you can still rise, maybe not to the same spotlight, but to your own kind of peace. Today, when dancers perform routines inspired by fame, or when fans post his clips with captions like "Legend," it's more than nostalgia. It's justice, it's acknowledgement, It's finally giving this man his flowers, the ones he should have gotten while he was still here. So here's to Gene, the boy who danced like fire, the man who lived without apology, the legend who turned rhythm into rebellion. His story reminds us that talent doesn't fade, it echoes. It moves through generations, through people who never met him but still feel him when the music starts. And maybe that's the real kind of fame, not the kind you see in lights, but the kind that lives on in hearts. So the next time you hear that iconic line, "You got big dreams? You want fame?" Well, fame costs. Remember the man who paid that price with everything he had. Because Gene Anthony Ray might have been underrated by the world, but not by us. Rest easy, Leroy. Your name still dances.